Hi guys and welcome back. I'm Adam Thomas. Thank you all so much for being here. Today's another time-lapse tutorial sort of thing. We're going to look at roses today. If you check out my Instagram, you'll see that I tend to do a lot of roses. So this is just going to show you exactly what I do from start to finish, how I achieve the results that I get on my Instagram with all my tattoos and all my roses. They're one of my favorite things to tattoo. So I'm going to show you exactly what I do, the reasons behind certain things that I do that might be different to other tattoo artists, but hopefully it'll give you an insight into how I do it. Before we jump into the rose, make sure to click the like button, subscribe to the channel if you're not already, make sure to click the bell icon to get notified of all my latest updates. And with all that being said, let's jump straight into it and check out this rose. So, rose. So the angle was a bit better for this one, just because the arm was a bit flatter compared to the last one that I put up. So you're going to be able to see a little bit clearer exactly what's going on. There were a few other little bits and bobs that we did later throughout the day, but this is mainly just going to focus on the rose. So at the moment I'm using a 3-round liner bug pin. I tend to use these a lot as my staple go-to liner. They give me a nice crisp line. They're great for doing the scratch lines, which is what I'm doing now. At the moment I'm just whipping through the music notes because I want those to stay nice and crisp. But I also want a really delicate line. The line that my stencils put in, what you'll find is it tends to blur out a little bit. It's a little bit too heavy, so I'll put in a temporary line, almost like a scratch line, a grey line, and then I'll come back and I'll block that in to get it to the perfect sort of line weight. So into the rose, I'm basically doing grey lines on all of my lined edges. So the way I work, I'm going to start doing the leaves first and I'll get into the rose. By the time I've done that, I'll have rubbed off most of my stencils. So the grey lines just help maintain that rose, keep it nice and crisp and solid, just stops all those fluffy edges. But the grey lines, you were able to hide those with the shading, so also make that you are saturating properly on that rose to hide those lines. So if you can still see your grey lines at the end of the tattoo, you haven't saturated that rose enough, and by the time it heals, it's just going to be too soft, and you're not going to have that nice sort of solid looking tattoo. So into the leaves, what I tend to do is I stop using grey lines and I start using my dark wash, maybe black, just to do more of a solid outline on the edge of those roses, edge of those leaves. With the leaves, they're the darkest part of my piece. So going back to some of the earlier tutorials, this is me getting those black points in. So you can see now I'm using a 7 bug pin liner, or 9, a slightly bigger liner. I tend to use like the rule of doubling up. So I normally have a 3, a 9, and then maybe like a 15 liner sort of thing. But yeah, just block out the edges and then using a 15 mag, curved mag, just then start sort of building up those leaves. So like I say, these are the darkest part of my roses. The main reason for bumping up that outline just gives you a little bit more of a buffer when you get that mag in there, so you're not having to faff around trying to get close to the edge. You've already got that in with the liner where you can get sort of tight into those nice little breaks and those little curved, those little spiky edges. So here you can see me just bumping up those edges with the liner, getting them nice and solid, and I switch over to the 15 mag and I start pounding in black into dark, and then with just a light wash over the top just to smooth everything out. Just making sure that I'm staying on top with my light source, so making sure that all my light's coming down from, looking at this, from the top left down to the top right. So all my leaves, they're going to have a highlight at the top, and then you're going to have the shadow in the middle bit where it curves in, then a highlight and then a shadow. So I do all my leaves first. I used to start from the bottom and work my way up. But I used to find that I'd get to the end with the leaves at the top, and yeah, it's just a little bit demotivating to have done the leaves at the bottom, then the rose, and then having to go back to doing the same technique of packing in a slightly heavier tone towards the end of the day. So I work around, get all my leaves done, bit of background, and then we can just focus on getting the nice rose done. So again, we've blocked out the edges. Now we're just going in with a 15 mag. You can see a little bit clearer like where I'm putting my shadows and where I'm leaving those skin gaps for the highlight, and then just whipping over at the end just to get that nice smooth look. These ones at the top towards the ditch and that curve, they are going to get a little bit more irritated just because that skin's a little bit more sensitive. But on the whole, everything of this, most parts of this tattoo were pretty solid. They're in a nice good spot on the top of that forearm. These are the last 2 leaves that I'm getting in. I think after this I start blocking in the rest of the black in the music notes, and then we can jump straight into the rose. So again, leaving the skin gaps is just as important with black and grey as getting that colour packed in nice and saturated. The great thing about putting those grey lines into the rose as well, it just means, like as you saw then, I can give it a good wash down as I'm going through the piece, just to keep everything nice and clean. It means I'm not going to get confused with any bits of ink that are on the surface of the skin, and I'm not going to overwork and try and cover up areas that aren't actually there, as in just bits of ink that are on the surface of the skin. So again, with the little 7 or 9 liner, I'm just blocking out the music notes. We went for a quick break because I didn't want to lose any of my stencil. Wrapped up some paper towel first and then cling film. So what that's going to do is stop the cling film from sweating onto the stencil, making your stencil disappear while they have a little bit of a stretch and a break. The cling film, the paper towel is just going to give you that little bit of a leeway, make your life that little bit easier, and make sure that stencil is going to stay on. I mean, I'd already kind of got rid of most of my stencil at this point. The grey lines were just holding in the rose. The leaves were all done, so I wasn't too fussed, but there were a few little shadow sort of stencil marks to work. So the dotted lines, if you've checked out my how to make a stencil video, that were still on there, which just showed me where some of the sort of the heavier shadows were, but yeah, on the whole I wasn't too fussed about keeping hold of those. So we're back here now with the rose. You can see how I've still got those little tiny bits of stencil on there, but mainly everything you see there are just grey lines. So really light, really hardly touching the skin, very fine lines, which is going to make my life really easy to disappear once I get into the tattoo process. So again, we're doing this really heavy shadow at the bottom. That's going to get me my nice solid black point in, and then I can work backwards from that, making sure my tones are nice and saturated. This reference is really good. There's some really big heavy cast shadows, which is what I tend to look for when I'm doing my roses. It just helps to boost that 3D element, and just gives you a nice dynamic look to the piece. So starting from the bottom, I tend to do the bottom leaves first, and then work my way round, get all the big petals done first. These tend to take the longest amount of time, even though the middle is a lot more complicated because it's smaller. You can get in and get all those pieces done. The outside petals tend to take that a little bit longer, just because you've got a bigger area to get smoothed out, and to make sure the shadow's in the right places. So for me, the bigger ones like that, a little bit more complicated technique-wise. So yeah, I tend to get those all done first, and sort of oddly enough, I do tend to work around in an anti-clockwise sort of rotation. Not really sure why I do that. I'm not trying to keep any of my stencil safe because all of that's gone, everything's scratch lined in. It's just something that feels natural to me, I suppose. So again, I got those bigger petals done up the one side, and now I've just come back down to the bottom, just because there was a bigger, heavier shadow at the bottom. So I wanted to just blast that in, just so I've got some nice sort of dark reference. So this petal that I'm doing right now, this was pretty much solid. I didn't pack it in solid because I thought that would have looked too harsh for the piece, so I took a little bit of artistic license with that, and just add a few little highlighted areas on the tips of the petals. Most of this is being done with a 27 mag. I tend to find with the outside petals, this just helps keep everything really nice and smooth, that nice smooth sort of soft airbrush finish to it. You're not going to get any little scratchy lines, and you're not going to irritate the skin too much. It's going to take a little bit more to pack stuff in, but you are going to get that smoother finish just because you've got that bigger surface area to work with. It's just going to give you that really nice sort of airbrush rose finish. The inks that I'm using on this, these are Empire Ink Grey Wash set. So they're ivory black plus dark medium light washes. I really like them, they go really nice. They have this almost powdery feel to them once everything settles down. It works really nice. At this point, I've pretty much done all of the outside petals. We're just down to the nitty gritty bit in the middle. Like I say, this tends to be a lot faster for me just because you can get into the little areas, get them done quite fast. You have to obviously drop down your mag size to get into those middle bits, so I'll probably drop down to 15, maybe 11. I was explaining to my client different machines. And then once we've done those bits and we get right into the middle, I'll go back to using the 7 round liner just to make sure I can get those middle bits really nice and crisp. So everything was settling down really nice on this guy's arm. It wasn't getting too irritated, wasn't getting too angry. So it was making my life really, really easy to tattoo. So again, at the moment, because this petal at the top is a little bit bigger, I am still with the 27, just to carve out these big shadows. So again, because my light source is coming from the top left down to the bottom right, I just want to make sure I can get all these shadows aiming in the right direction and get those in nice and solid, because they're going to be the darkest parts of my pieces. Like I say, you get the darkest parts in first, then you can work backwards tone-wise, and you're not going to lose any value, and you're going to get it as close to the reference as possible. The main thing with all of this is just stay nice and saturated. So all these nice crisp edges that you can see, a lot of the work is being done by those grey lines, so they're going to help keep everything really nice and crisp and solid. You're not going to get any fluffy edges where you're trying to get to a line with a mag and you might be pushing and pulling away from that line. The grey line is just going to keep everything really solid and really nice and crisp. So yeah, now I've gone down to an 11 mag, I think this was. Again, all my mags are bug pin and curved, so if I don't say that, they are bug pin and curved. So it's an 11 just to start getting in the slightly smaller petals as we start getting closer and closer to the middle. You'll see in a minute when I switch over to use a liner to get into those middle bits. So at the moment I'm still using an 11 just to get the shadows in, just so I can get that nice sort of blurred out bit. And now I've switched over to a liner, so again 7 round liner, just to carve out those middle bits, and you can see how much more intricate I can get with a liner than a mag, just to get those little tiny details in the middle. Just popping in the water droplet, which tends to be a bit of a signature in all of my roses. And then at this point I'm using dark wash, so in essence what you do with a highlight with white, I do with a dark wash at the end, or black, just to crisp up some of the shadows, just to make sure that everything's really punched in, and just dropping in those really heavy low lights on the petals that are hitting sort of light to dark. So anywhere where you've got a really dark shadow and a big highlight on the top, that's why I just hit those lines, and it just gives you that extra bit of dynamic look to it. So like I said before, the lines on the music notes at the bottom, they're all temporary, so just a real light scratch line. So I'm just going back through with a medium, maybe a dark grey line, grey wash, just because I didn't want them to be solid black lines. I want them to settle out and calm down a little bit. I don't want them to take too much away. I want the music notes to stand out the most. When I get into the background, you'll see how I'm going to carve that through the piece, just to give us that nice sort of white line running through. So now we're hitting the whites. Again, I'm back with the liner. So this is the 3 round liner. So keeping those highlights really nice and tight and punchy to keep it as realistic as possible. I take a bit of artistic license with the white. I do try and keep as close to my reference as I can, but I do add a few extra little bits of white lines that aren't technically there, just to hold some edges, make things a little bit sharper, a bit more punchy, and just to bump up that nice dynamic range. The middle parts of the rose I tend to hit maybe a couple of times, 3 times, they really need that like really harsh saturation of white. But the main thing is just to make sure that white is punched in. Again, like some of my other videos, you don't want a wishy-washy white. You need it to be punched in and very, very purposeful. You don't want to put white in, put your client through a load of pain just for no particular reason. So at this point, we started doing a few little bits and bobs at the bottom. My client wanted some little roses, my client wanted some little doves, and some classic sort of bubble clouds. I don't tend to do a lot of bubble clouds. Everything I tend to do is realism, but he was adamant this is what he wanted. It's been a fair few years since I've done these style of clouds. I did, in all honesty, really enjoy doing them. They're really nice. They are quite a bit of work, even though they're very simple. To get that real nice sort of gradient running through can sometimes be a bit of a pain, just because getting a nice gradient from like a dark to a light wash over a big surface area can be quite tricky, especially if you saw my previous time lapse, which was the line cut with the reflection, because we had those big gradients across the whole arm. It does make life a little bit more difficult. So what I'm doing now is I'm putting those grey lines back in, so the same lines that I put into the rose. Again, this is going to keep the clouds really, really nice and crisp, and just means I'm not going to rub off any of the Sharpie lines that I put in. I'm also outlining the doves. I don't normally do this, but the nature of what we're trying to achieve, it makes sense for me to put an outline around these. Again, it's a real light outline. It's not a solid black one. It'll be a dark wash at the very most. just so that there is a harsher edge around them, but I don't want it to look like a proper trad piece. I do want to keep some level of realism. And because I'm about to do the clouds, I obviously don't want to rub off the stencil for the ducks. So starting off with a dark wash with these clouds, just carving out the bottom edge, always sort of like whipping out, just trying to keep everything as smooth and as gradiented as we can. If you start packing in with tight circles, what you're going to find is you're going to end up with rows and layers through the piece, through the gradient. Whereas if you're whipping out constantly, you're constantly fading out. So as you work through your tones, through your grey washes, you're just going to get that real nice smooth finish. So the first row was done, we're back in to do dark wash, just carving out that edge as soon as it hits the grey line. That's where we're having the majority of the dark. Then we're going to move into the medium wash and then light wash, run straight over, just to really smooth it out into the skin. Again, it's important with doing stuff like this to make sure you're keeping the skin nice and clean. So make sure we're using water wash, using the rinse bottle a lot, getting everything nice and clean, so you can see exactly what you're trying to put in gradient wise, and you're not getting confused with anything you've left on the surface of the skin from previous wipe downs. So the big movement I'm doing, I'm at the same speed as what I normally do. I'm just changing the stroke length. So instead of me packing small, I'm doing bigger, longer strokes. That's just gonna make it a little bit more maggy, but the more you go over it with medium and then light wash, it's gonna smooth out those mag marks and just give you that real nice soft gradient, blending out into the skin. A lot of work's gonna be done in healing, but this did end up being really nice and smooth. Like I say, the skin was really nice to work with, which is always half the battle with the tattooing process. So again, these big movements here, that's all my water wash, that's all my light wash, just to smooth everything out into the rows, carve it down and just start integrating the two sort of sections of the tattoo together. So you can see on this left hand side where I've started to carve around those music notes. This is going to be the plan for the rest of the sleeve, where when it's not on an element and the music notes are on background, all of that's going to be in negative space. So any background's just going to get carved out with those music notes. I think around the right hand side I started blocking it out, which I'm probably going to do now, and you can see how I'm using dark wash at the moment, and then my medium and light wash, they're going to go up to that line and just carve that line out and really make that stand out, that we've got that negative space for those music notes. See how I'm working all the way across that line, and it's sort of all starting to make a bit of sense. We did do some script at the start of the day, which I didn't film just because it was script. But yeah, all of this just puts up to that and just get a nice little hairline around it. So now we've done all the clouds, I think we're going to start doing the birds. No, I'm lying to you. So yeah, I decided to do one more little bit of cloud, just making out the bottom, which just made, visually looking at it, it made a bit more sense just because it gave somewhere for those music notes to sort of hit to, and it looked a little bit lost on that one side. So at this point we start doing the birds. So I wanted to keep the shade in, sort of realistic, sort of close to my reference, which you can half see on the top right of the screen. But I didn't want to go too wild, just enough to give us that shape and that volume. So again, concentrating on where my light source is coming from, just getting those shadows in. The fact that I've got the outlines around there made my life really easy, because all I had to do is get the minimal amount of shading in there, just to make them look like we've got 3D little birds on there. It was so small, there was no sort of real stress in getting loads of detail in, because you just physically couldn't do it. It was just enough to make it look nice and neat. So that's pretty much the piece finished. It's nice and solid, really enjoyed doing it. A few more little bits of white highlight across the top. There was nothing too wild at this point. I'm sure his arm was getting pretty sore. This was pretty much six hours we were working on this. Roses normally take about 4, and then it was just a couple of hours to do all the background and a few other little bits and bobs. Really nice piece to work on.
So there you go, guys, that was a rose from start to finish, exactly how I do it in time lapse. So you're looking at a good sort of 4-hour rose done in like 10 minutes, and you get to see a really quick fast forwarded way that I move around the rose, and see exactly what I do when and how, and hopefully that gives you a little bit of little bit of a guide as to how I achieve the roses that I do. Like I say, it really helps me seeing how I do these roses. It helps me progress as an artist and get better. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to smash the like button. Click subscribe to stay up to date with all my latest videos. Make sure to click the bell icon, which will get you notified every time I post a new video. With all that being said, thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you on the next one. Peace.